You cannot ignore growth. With AI here, growth is being forced on us. If your ability as a leader still depends on the title you hold, 2026 is gonna expose that. But why? Leadership expectations are shifting. Just because people are compliant doesn't mean that they're confident in your ability. Unless you have their trust, you don't really have as much authority as you think. In this video, I'm gonna show you 3 things that leaders absolutely are gonna need to know for 2026 in order to be successful. And make sure you stick around to the end. The last one is so overlooked that I've seen it completely destroy the trust that people have in a leader when that leader does not consider it properly. The fact of the matter is, the old way of doing leadership, where people say something and people just do what they say, kind of blind obedience, autocratic style leadership, it still works, but barely. Because when there's speed or great change or even uncertainty, this style of leadership just kind of falls apart. Because what's happening is people are just following your instructions, often blindly, but they're not really understanding your judgment. They just know that you're barking orders. Trust is the real currency of leadership that allows your followers to fully buy in and willingly follow you as a leader. Since trust is this currency, here's what you have to do in order to develop your ability as a leader and strengthen people's faith in your judgment. Your flex ability. And I don't mean flexibility as in like I can bend this way or that way. Your flex ability. It's similar, but it's a little bit different. It's about your situational awareness and your intentionality. How intentionally do you respond to every situation? Why does this matter? With the rise of AI, things are changing faster than they ever have. The change cycles are decreasing, the workload is being piled on, and people are just generally feeling overwhelmed with all of the new things that they have to do, especially the older generations. Now that's another point. We're mixing generations. We're getting more and more of Gen Z and younger moving into the workforce. You have millennials like myself and older who have been in the workforce for a while. We all have different ideas of how things are, different concepts of reality. We all have different things that we value. This isn't anything new. This has been happening for a long time. But because we're mixing more people together, we have to be stable as leaders and understand how to meet people where they're at. So this is why situational leadership is so valuable. So what is this flex ability? Well, I kind of touched on it just a second ago. It's situational leadership. And that's the ability that you have to adapt to people and situations, meet them where they're at, and get them where they need to be, adjusting your leadership style to the situation at hand. So I took the liberty of designing a leadership style assessment. So let me read you this brief description that I made for a situational leader. Situational leaders adapt their leadership style to the needs of the individual team members and the situation at hand. They use a range of approaches from directing and coaching to delegating and supporting, and it all depends on the context. So here's an example of how I tried to improve my situational leadership. I was coaching a fellow coworker, and I don't have a position of authority over this guy, but I was coaching him, trying to help him understand how we move forward through this specific scenario that we were going through. It was a bit of a tough project that we were working on, and it was kind of untread ground. And so we were just trying to figure out, okay, what's our next step? And he was looking to me a lot for the answers because I have more experience. Something that I have a problem sometimes doing is over-explaining. I'll not really make the point directly right away. I'll try to make all of the evidence first and then make my point at the end. But that didn't really work for him. He's a very direct kind of person and needed me to just make my point more succinctly. So what I did to adapt my leadership is to work on giving a pause between his question and the answer. That way I could collect my thoughts, not over-explain, and try to be a little more concise than I normally have a tendency of being. And this helped us to collaborate better together and have a successful project in the long run. And I understand that this is a learning curve, especially if you're used to just one style of leadership. If your organization that you're working in or your business is built to just operate a certain way, it can be very difficult to try to increase this flex ability, this situational leadership ability. But it's not impossible. Now I want to read something else to you real quick. A low score of situational leadership ability suggests you may tend to rely on a primary leadership style, even when circumstances might call for a different approach. This consistency can provide stability for the team, but it can also limit the ability for growth. It can limit your ability to respond effectively to changing dynamics. So what does that mean? It means you might feel more comfortable using specific methods in order to get your point across, or in order to direct the flow of work, or get your team all on the same page. And you might prefer these rather than trying to experiment when a situation calls for it. This is most often seen in people who like very predictive environments. You like to go to work, you like to know exactly what's going to happen, then you like to go home, and you want this repetition. You don't want it to be chaotic or something different every day. So if your environment that you're working in is a predictable environment, this is a very solid approach. But if your environment gets shook up for any reason, like change, which is a constant, change is a constant, it's a lot harder for you to adapt because you haven't built up the skill set in order to be able to adapt. You haven't increased your situational leadership. You haven't experimented and failed, because maybe you're afraid of failure. But if you don't experiment and try and fail a little bit, you're just gonna be stuck in the way that you've always done things, and you're really not gonna grow in the long run. So how do you improve situational leadership? It's as simple as trial and error. Honestly, you've got to experiment. You've got to create your hypothesis, create an experiment to test that hypothesis, and try to replicate it. And if you can replicate it, then your hypothesis was right. But if you can't replicate it, then maybe it was just a one-off, or maybe it's not going to work for this new situation that you're in. So this is how you develop situational leadership. You kind of have to experiment. You have to try things out. You can't be afraid to fail. So if you'd like to know more about this situational leadership thing, go ahead and check out the link in my bio. I will also post it here in the video description. You can follow this link, and from there you'll be able to find all my other socials and my website. And the first thing that pops up on my website is an absolutely free leadership style assessment. You take this, I think it's 36 questions. You take a 36 question assessment, and at the end of it, it will score your answers, and it will send you an email which will give you tips and tricks completely free and yours to keep. You can download it, save it. It's just a small write-up to help you improve your leadership ability, as well as for each leadership style, how to increase your situational leadership. And it's completely free, so don't miss out on that opportunity. You've got to be dedicated to change. Now, we've alluded to this a little bit in the first point. When we're trying to increase our situational leadership, we can't be afraid of failure. We can't be afraid to experiment. Being willing to change and being dedicated to change are not the same thing. There was an executive who retired recently from where I work. He said something to a group of second level leaders, which was kind of mind-blowing. And we'll just call this executive Bob. One of the second level leaders asked Bob, what do we do in order to be better at our jobs? What can you show us from your 40-something years of experience? How can we get better? How can we be better than we are? And what Bob said next was actually kind of depressing. He said, don't try to change. Don't even try. We go through these cycles where we begin a change initiative or effort or whatever. We go through all this headache, trouble, trial, frustration, and we just end up coming full circle right back to where we started. So don't even try to change. If I had one piece of advice, it would just be, don't even try to change. And to me, that absolutely blew my mind. Don't try to change. You're complaining about change cycles not being successful, and this is why. It's because you're not even willing. But even those who are willing to change, if they're not fully dedicated to the change, you can still go through part of that cycle and end up to the frustration phase because your dedication hasn't carried you all the way to fruition, to where something is complete, to see the actual fruit of your labors, the results that you've been looking for. Change is difficult, but it's never impossible. And if you're not dedicated to change, you're really not dedicated to growth, period. You have to adapt to survive. So how do we show dedication to change? It's all in how you implement it. So you can try this method that I developed to help me get through change. And it works for me. I've used a lot of change models from big corporations, but I feel like they leave out some of the most important parts, namely the human elements of change. So I developed one for myself and I use it and I feel like it works pretty well. So let me share it with you. Communicate, acknowledge, develop, empower, negate, commit, and ecosystemize, or cadence. If you want real change to take place, there has to be a rhythm behind it, a steady beat to drive it forward. Communicate. You communicate, why are we doing this? What's the importance of it? The need for the change. Acknowledge. This is one of those human elements that's really overlooked in most models. You're acknowledging that you're dealing with real people who have real feelings, who have real mental models, who have a real way of looking at the world, who are thinking, feeling people, not cold, calculating machines. You're dealing with real people who are going to be affected by this change in some way. So you need to understand how people might react to your change. Then from there, you develop. This is where you start building up the capabilities of those people to enact the change. You help them understand it. What are we going to do? You've already told them why. You've already said, I acknowledge your concerns, your frustrations. You can always bring those to me, but now we're going to develop your skill set. From there, you empower them. So people with ability, people with knowledge and desire, with zero empowerment, you're just wasting your breath. This is, I think, what Bob was complaining about, because there's all these changes being pushed out. People are told to do it. They have all the responsibility of the change, but they have no authority to carry many aspects of the change out. And so their hands are tied and they get frustrated and they're like, what's the point? So you've got to empower people to be able to actually do the things. Don't micromanage, okay? You empower them, you delegate and trust them to carry out the initiative. You can't see everything that happens. If you're a parent, you understand this. You know, we like to pretend we have eyes in the back of our head, but in reality, we know we don't. So we empower them, we teach them to behave the right way when we're not looking. We develop that integrity in them. So this is what empowering people to do change does. It develops an integrity for them to carry out the change, even when you're not there to manage it. And then negate. Now, negate is about minimizing the fear of risk. It's not that you can completely delete a risk. It's not going to happen. But if you can minimize the impact of a risk, or you can minimize the fear that a risk has on the minds of your people, you can help them to cross a big hurdle. A lot of people are like, oh, this is a wall I see. It's risky to go to the other side. I really don't want to take that step. Stepping over into the unknown is always scary. You can help them to feel encouraged to take the next step. And then next is commit. So I think this is also another breakdown point that Bob was talking about. We get through these cycles, right? And then a lot of people don't really commit to it. They're like, okay, yeah, I'm just going to do the bare minimum. And a lot of that comes to a lack of understanding. Maybe it hasn't been communicated properly, or maybe we haven't really acknowledged how it's going to affect them or how it can make them feel. Or maybe we haven't really done the legwork to develop the skills they need. Or maybe they're just not empowered. Anything that comes before this step can cause this step to fail. Commit to making the change a reality. No matter what it takes, no matter how hard it gets, no matter how much we have to pay, whatever it is, this change needs to be the new normal. Now, I'm not saying you keep doing a change if it's obviously failing, if all of your metrics are showing that, hey, red flag, don't do this. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if all of your metrics are saying this is the right thing to do, this is the right way to go, and you're not fully committed to it, That's the point where I kind of agree with Bob. You shouldn't start because you're not ready to fully engage and you're just going to end up making people feel frustrated. And the last one, ecosystemize. Now this is making sure that your change has the big system in mind. How does your business operate as a whole? How does this change affect everything from all the way up the line to all the way down the line? There's a long history of companies who have made this mistake where they haven't looked at the bigger picture, all of the systems and how they interact, and say their marketing side is really good and their marketing is so good that their production wasn't really ready to meet the customer demand that marketing generated. Ecosystemizing is understanding how your systems fit together and how this change is going to fit into those systems before you begin. Once you've gotten all the way through all the steps of cadence, you are ecosystemizing it. You're making it the new normal. You're making it the new reality. Now, don't worry if you can't remember all of these, because I made a free downloadable graphic. All you have to do is follow the link in bio and subscribe to my newsletter. We now come to the pinnacle of this video. This is the most important one that I mentioned earlier. If you don't implement this correctly, you can lose all credibility as a leader. You have to seek to understand before you seek to execute. So every leader manages, but not every manager really leads. So there's an executive that I was coaching through strategy, development, and deployment, which, by the way, is the first pillar of the Develop You system. And he was really struggling with getting out of assumption mode. He thought he knew where the problem was, and he wanted us to go collect a bunch of data and information for that problem. So we did, and come to find out that wasn't really the problem at all. So from there, what we should have done is refocus how we did things. But instead, he wanted us to go deeper. So we went deeper. We got all the way to the point of creating something like 40 different strategies. But he kept making assumptions of, oh, well, it's probably just people not understanding, or it's probably this, it's probably that. Even when we were trying to communicate to him, well, you say that, but your data says this. So you're making all these assumptions, but your data is actually pointing in this direction. We just could not get him to break free from assumption mode. And at the very end of it all, it was kind of a wasted effort, because when he was replaced with a different executive, that person was totally confused on what the original executive's idea was and just kind of scrapped the whole thing. And the root cause, he wasn't really trying to understand where the real problems were. He was already in solution mode before we collected enough information to validate that was the problem. Seeking to understand before execution is understanding root cause. And root cause analysis sounds like a really fancy thing, but it's as simple as this. Why? Asking why 5 times. So say this happens, why does this happen? Go down a level, 5 times minimum. And then from there, if you can go deeper, go deeper. But if not, then you're more than likely at the root cause of the problem. Asking why and seeking to understand, getting the real current state data is so important before you try to do anything. Before you try to implement any change, you have to understand where you are now. You cannot get to where you need to be if you don't even understand where you're standing now. What we typically see on the surface level as the problem and the immediate solution to that problem rarely is going to be a long-term solution to really resolve that problem. Think of it like a blackberry bush. You let one take root and they just go crazy. A blackberry bush, if you don't dig it up by the root, then it will continue to spread and grow no matter how many times you cut it, no matter how many poisons you put on it. Sometimes it just keeps growing. Short of salting the ground, dig up the root in order to actually solve the problem that you're having with blackberry bushes. Now, how does it kill your credibility? How does it kill the trust that people have in you? Shooting from the hip solutions and saying, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this. This is part of what frustrated Bob. People didn't really understand what they were trying to change. They didn't really know the root cause of the problems they were trying to solve. And people are like, well, this doesn't affect me. That thing's way up here and I'm way down here. I'm just a first line employee or first line supervisor or below. How is it gonna affect me? People feel frustrated because they don't feel like they're really part of this change, but rather that the change is being imparted onto them. People on the front lines, because they are there in operation every single day, they see the problems. They'll be able to tell you a laundry list of things that are way closer to the root cause than some executive way up here. So when you're pushing initiatives on people, you lose credibility, especially when it fails. Trust is here at the bottom, and without trust, everything else falls apart. You don't really have leadership without people trusting you before you execute. You must really understand what's going on. Don't just shoot from the hip. And I've seen how it assassinates the character of certain leaders when they're doing this. I've seen people, I've been one of those people who's like, man, I'm not gonna listen to that guy. I respect his position, but the things that are coming out of his mouth, I'll just nod along. And as soon as he's out of the room, I'm just gonna do the bare minimum. So the key takeaway, if you're moving into leadership or you are a leader and you're moving into 2026, is this: you cannot ignore growth. Growth is never accidental, it's always intentional. And the best way to start growing for 2026 is to improve your flexibility, your situational leadership, to be dedicated to change, and to seek to understand before you seek to execute. Know the root cause before you try to implement a solution. Remember, change is a process, not just a moment in time. Think of a butterfly. Caterpillar doesn't turn into a butterfly or a moth simply just by a flick of a switch kind of a thing. It's a long process with multiple stages. Growth isn't about how much you can get done at one time. It's not about the hustle. I'm not talking to you about motivation and being able to motivate yourself. When you have some kind of title, leadership title, it can absolutely open doors. But growth determines who's gonna follow you through those doors. So reflect on this. Is there anywhere right now that I'm relying more on a position or a title than I am intentionally growing? If so, try these 3 things. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and go ahead and watch this video here at the end screen, which goes over how to improve your delivery when speaking in front of a group of people. I'll see you in the next one.